Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today, President Trump welcomed to the White House President López Obrador of Mexico. The meeting reaffirmed the incredibly strong ties between President Obrador and President Trump. The leaders noted that many people have bet against their ability to work together in a strong and productive fashion, but rest assured, they work together and they work together well. The U.S.-Mexico relationship has never been stronger or more productive, thanks to the leadership of President Trump. The USMCA, in particular, is a major win for our two countries and for America's workers. Under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, more than 4 million manufacturing jobs will be regained that were lost under NAFTA. This will be a huge influx of American jobs that were lost under the failed NAFTA trade deal that went into effect. In addition, tens of thousands of manufacturing plants were lost because of NAFTA. We want to bring those on shore, and the USMCA will go a long way in bringing back those manufacturing plants and those millions of jobs that were lost under NAFTA. NAFTA was a bad deal for the American worker because it left American workers behind. Many politicians forgot the damage wrought by disastrous trade deals such as NAFTA, but President Trump did not forget. It took this president to change the status quo, renegotiate NAFTA, and secure a better deal for the American worker. And here's why. The USMCA alone will create 176,000 American jobs. We believe the other trade deals that this president has negotiated will add to that number and help undo a lot of what NAFTA has done. The USMCA will boost American manufacturing, including wages, new jobs, and exports. And the USMCA will create 76,000 auto manufacturing jobs, crucial to the well-being of this country. The USMCA is good for business. As President Trump rebuilds the strongest, most inclusive economy in history, the USMCA will help jumpstart our economy. The USMCA is projected to increase GDP by $235 billion. This means jobs, jobs, jobs. And during today's meeting between the presidents, one official from Mexico noted that many considered the USMCA an 80-20 probability. Now it is 100% certainty. And with that, I'll take questions. Yes.
Okay, two questions for you. The first is, President Trump hasn't taken questions from White House reporters in 2 weeks. While we always enjoy talking to you, this White House likes to say the president is the most accessible in history, so why hasn't he answered questions for 2 weeks amid a pandemic?
This president routinely answers questions. He's more accessible than any of his predecessors. I'm sure you'll be hearing from him soon. He's always up to the job, but he's hard at work in the Oval Office.
And also, is the administration retaliating against Dr. Fauci for publicly contradicting the president? Today, he was told to come here to the White House for the task force meeting, which meant he could not answer questions from reporters.
Look, that's a decision for the task force as to who appears at the briefings, but you've heard from a lot of our doctors. Today you heard from Dr. Birx. Dr. Fauci's appeared on 6 TV programs since June 1st. You just heard from him in a task force briefing on June 26th, and he participated in the vice president's governor's briefing on COVID-19 on June 29th. So you've heard from him recently, along with the rest of our doctors in the past 5 days. Dr. Hahn's been on TV 6 times as well.
Does the president still have confidence in Dr. Fauci?
The president has confidence in the conclusions of our medical experts, but it's up to him to determine what to do with that information and to take what we hear from Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and others, and take what he values in their opinion and come to the ultimate consensus that's best for this country. Caitlin.
I have 2 questions as well. One, what is it exactly in the CDC guidelines that the president doesn't like?
Yeah, so the CDC guidelines that the president mentioned today, I would note that it was emphasized by Dr. Redfield that he doesn't want these guidelines to be a reason for schools to not reopen. They're not requirements and they're not prescriptive, and that's per the CDC director.
Right, but what is it that the president thinks is too strict and too expensive and too impractical, as I think the word is?
One of the things is in the guidelines, which I would note that in these guidelines there are 28 implicit acknowledgments that these guidelines aren't even feasible. 18 times it's mentioned that some of this might not be possible, and 9 times it's mentioned that some of this might not be feasible. So that's embedded into the guidelines, and one specific example I'll give you is on food services. Have children bring their own meals as feasible. Well, there are 22 million children in this country who depend on these meals at schools, who depend on access to nutrition in schools. So that's one example.
So is that just one thing that the president doesn't like? Is there anything else?
Well, there are several that are in there, but we need to make sure as the American...
I'm wondering what they're going to change is my point, really.
Well, you'll see, because as the vice president said, the CDC will come out with new guidelines, additional guidelines. There will be, I think, 5, he said, and you'll see those when they come out.
Okay, so my
Yes.
second question, just really quickly, is the president and the CDC clearly don't seem to be on the same page on what the guidance is, what he is hoping they put out, what the CDC is actually putting out. So why doesn't the president just go to these task force meetings so then he can talk about it with them? Because our reporting is that he hasn't been to one since April.
So I would note that the CDC is very much on the same page as the president, which is why you heard the CDC director today underscore these are not prescriptive, these are not requirements, and that there will be supplemental guidelines. So they are on the same page. The president's routinely briefed about the coronavirus each and every day. The relevant information is brought to him on the big decisions, and then he moves forward in the way that's best for our country. Jill.
Every day.
Thanks,
Jill.
Haley. So just following up on those new CDC guidelines that we're told are coming out next week, did the White House pressure the CDC to change public health guidelines that were reached in accordance with medical professionals because the president doesn't like them?
No, not at all. But the president made his opinion quite clear publicly this morning on Twitter for all to see. And we would note that guidelines, and I would underscore the American Academy of Pediatrics, because it is an organization that's made up of 67,000 pediatricians that they represent. They are very adamant about kids needing to go back to school, and they said school policies must be flexible and nimble in responding to new information, and administrators must be willing to refine approaches when specific policies are not working. Policies should be practical, feasible, and appropriate for child and adolescent's development stage.
Is the president against social distancing guidelines in school, things that are included in those guidelines now, like placing desks apart from each other, staggering school times? Is he against those elements of it?
So I'm not going to get into each and every element and where he stands on it. The president wants us to go back to school safely. Our children depend on it. These schools are essential, and I think he stands on the side of parents across this country who want to see their kids back in school, who want to see, make sure that their kids don't fall behind in education. Yes.
Thank you. So the city of Houston just a little while ago canceled the Texas Republican convention because of COVID concerns. Are there any fresh thoughts about scaling back Jacksonville?
No, we're still moving forward with Jacksonville. It'll be a safe event, it will be a good event, and it will be up to the RNC as to how those details are hashed out.
Can I ask an education question, not lower school, but colleges and universities? A couple of them at least are challenging the ICE ruling having to do with visas for foreign students when the universities are not holding in-person classes. And I'm wondering if that is aimed at pressuring colleges to fully open, that feel maybe that it's not safe to do so.
I think the policy speaks for itself. You know, you don't get a visa for taking online classes from, let's say, University of Phoenix. So why would you if you were just taking online classes generally? And I would note with regard to Harvard and MIT suing over this, and all due respect to my former alma mater, perhaps the better lawsuit would be coming from students who have to pay full tuition with no access to in-person classes to attend. Yes.
When it comes to the flexibility with the Jacksonville event, could that flexibility include moving events elsewhere if the case counts continue to rise in Florida, even possibly back to Charlotte if the cases stabilize there or go down?
You know, I'll leave that to the president and not engage in hypotheticals, but he's very excited to go to Florida. It's his home state. Jacksonville is the designation and the designated place of the Republican National Convention.
Consider how to proceed forward. As schools are potentially considering perhaps a middle-of-the-road approach that, for example, New York is looking at, is that something that is acceptable to the president, this half home, half in the building, as opposed to opening them up fully?
Yeah, I'll leave that to the president. I haven't spoken to him specifically about the middle-of-the-road approach, but I will talk to him about that and get an answer for you. One thing I want to leave you with, and thank you all, these were very good and very thoughtful questions, so I appreciated them. This is a bit of a news item. The Kansas City mayor and the governor wrote to the governor a letter that said this: "We are at a crisis point," he said, and additional help was needed to provide more tools for law enforcement and prosecutors to interrupt conspiracies to commit murder and the violent acts, particularly offenses committed by felons using deadly weapons in the streets of Kansas City. And as of yesterday, Kansas City had reached 100 homicides, a 40% increase from last year, according to the mayor's office. Absolutely tragic numbers. And Attorney General Barr has announced that there will be a launch of what's going to be called Operation Legend. It's a new initiative designated to fight the surge of violent crime that we've seen in Kansas City, directly in response to those requests by the mayor and by the governor. And specifically, Operation Legend is going to focus on a federal effort to increase law enforcement presence in the city. Attorney General Barr has directed agents from the Department of Justice's law enforcement agencies, the FBI, U.S. Marshal, DEA, and ATF, to be on the ground in Kansas City within the next 10 days to help state and local officials fight the surge of violent crime. Operation Legend is named after 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro, who tragically died on June 29th as a result of being shot in the face while he slept in his home. Taliaferro survived a heart surgery as an infant, and he tragically lost his life. And we at the federal government want to make sure that that never happens and use our resources to the fullest extent of the law to ensure that individuals and young children like Legend are able to live their lives and live so peacefully. Thank you so much.
Kaylee, is it safe to send people back to schools? Is it safe to send Manafort